Recently, Joshua Moon, the owner-operator of the Kiwi Farms, published a piece on Substack, essentially making the case that the efforts of many major corporations, media figures, and people with a lot of cash to throw around to try and take his website down is unfair and unethical and undeserved censorship. Today, I wanted to respond to that article here on YouTube, because for one thing, although I disagree broadly with what this article actually says and how it says it and why it says it, I think it's an argument coming sincerely from someone and well-reasoned enough to warrant a sincere response. And two, I want to throw my hat into the ring on this, because I don't think we'll be seeing many people, especially many lefties, trying to engage with this article honestly. Plus, I do think there is a non-zero chance that Joshua Moon sees this video. Although I don't think Moon will change his mind about anything just because he hears anything I say, it doesn't mean I shouldn't bother saying it, I think. And for the sake of transparency, I'm going to link his article itself in the description below if you want to read it or see where I'll be pulling quotes from. If you're someone who listens to my stuff regularly already, there might be something interesting in this video for you, but I will be scripting it primarily from here on out as if I'm responding directly to Joshua Moon about his piece. So with that in mind, Dear Joshua, my name's Card. I'm a long-time progressive anarchist political organiser, small freelance journalist, and professional historical researcher. I wanted to talk about your recent Substack piece, and I'd appreciate it if you heard me out, because I read it, earnestly considered its message, but I think the whole article encapsulates why you keep having the problems you keep running into. Namely, you bring them on yourself, whether you realise it or not. The main thrust of this piece is you decrying the fact that once you and your website were in the crosshairs of a rich, evidently resourceful person with a lot of connections in the tech industry, it was really easy to censor and deplatform you in a lot of respects. And in a lot of ways that most people wouldn't readily be able to prevent and counter as you have been by creating alternative solutions and workarounds and such. And by the end of the article, you're trying to get people who might agree with you to rally around the idea that individuals and tech world giants being able to censor people just because they personally don't like them or their politics is bad, right? Here's the thing though. In many ways, I think this reality where the corporate powers that be have this much leverage over the average schmo are what you, consciously or not, might as well be advocating for. Not to mention, and take this from a long-time political organiser, merely asking for people to believe in some communal project, online no less, never produces any fruitful results on its own. Doubly so when the people you're pitching this anti-censorship pipe dream to are the sorts of intrinsically individualistic reactionaries that we both know make up most of your audience. What you're suggesting in this article here smacks of even parts complaining about being outplayed and wish-casting for a solution that can never come. For instance, you've got a sizable section in here that's just essentially recounting how the streamer Clara Sorrenti and Liz Fong Jones, formerly of Google, fucked your shit up for a while by campaigning to get service providers to drop your website. And it just comes across like bitching that people would go after you because they don't like you on account of what you choose to do. As an aside, how you refer to Fong Jones and Sorrenti here is pretty emblematic of one of your issues, because they happen to both be trans women, but you refer to them as you would refer to men throughout the article. Not surprising, perhaps. As a progressive, I personally would not have done that, but that itself isn't the problem I wanted to point out. It's the fact that you choose to be antagonistic towards people. You invite them to be mad at you, plus you make yourself look as unsympathetic to a broad audience in the process. I guarantee, if you toned down the transphobia by a notch or two, those trans chicks wouldn't actively be trying to get you deplatformed. Being obstinate on an issue like this isn't being principled, it's just inviting people to not like you. Don't choose to not play along, then cry about the fact the other kids play rough. Or, to make a comparison that's more on your level as the owner of Kiwi Farms, remember when Chris Chan's PlayStation account or whatever got hacked, and the guy who did it said he'd hand everything back safe and sound if only Chris would sing the "It's Okay to Be Gay" song on camera. Then Chris simply couldn't do it, couldn't even mouth the words "I'm gay" on camera without physically retching, even if doing so would have been very beneficial. Chris's homophobia plus autism was overriding all common sense there, which is what makes it funny as well. Josh, you've got the same problem. If you can't bring yourself to use people's chosen pronouns, even in ostensibly serious writing like in this article, that's not making a point, it's just autistic stubbornness. But even if we put aside the fact you actively try to make these people with money and connections not like you, the simple fact of the matter is, like it or not, unfair, arbitrary denial of service from big corporate providers is part of the capitalist system you live under, and simply complaining about it doesn't change that. And now it just comes across like bitching for the sake of bitching. And realistically, are you not one of those terminally online pseudo-libertarian tech bros who claims to love unchecked capitalism, even as you complain about the minor safeguards put in place by regulators like the US Federal Reserve? This is what you get. A system where corporate interests, far above the heads of you or I, aren't accountable to anyone. I personally don't like it, but anyone who calls themselves a capitalist is definitely part of the problem, especially when that person is actually just a neoliberal subject who won't do shit about it, like most people. And here's the thing. If there's going to be a big fight about your capacity to have a website between you and some former Google exec, my default inclination would be to not care. But if I were to be made to care, I sure as hell wouldn't intuitively back you. I'd want to go with a winner. If you want to keep playing pretend that you're an Ayn Rand protagonist type of person here, waging a one-man war against corporate censorship, put it this way. The Liz Fong Joneses of the world have a Nietzschean will to power of their own. They want to take down your website, if only because they personally don't like it. But they're actually going to do something about it. If you want your work and your livelihood to not go away, then I guess you should try harder to stop them. Now, at the moment, as you yourself point out in your article, your website is still around because, at least for now, you've been able to jerry-rig some alternative website provider things together and take cryptocurrency donations or whatever. Something you acknowledge that most beleaguered website owners wouldn't be able to do necessarily. But that doesn't sound like you're winning to me. It sounds like you're just barely hanging on, and this article is complaining that you've all but lost as it is. It'd be like if in the last month of the Second World War in Europe, the Germans started publishing periodicals about how they're winning a lot of street-level engagements with the Russians, despite the very unfair way the Red Army has reduced them to fighting with 15-year-old conscripts. And in that situation, all any honest observer would say is, sure, you might be holding ground on a day-to-day basis right now, but the fact that these fights are already happening in Berlin is not indicative of the fact you're winning the war. Josh, it might be impressive to the other reactionary tech dorks that you're still afloat despite getting banished from every mainstream service provider's good books, but the fact you even have to go to such lengths to keep going at this point doesn't seem to bode well. And losers just aren't that respectable. Similarly, you spend a surprisingly large amount of time in this article complaining about how Wikipedia is run, saying it's open to editorial abuse if moneyed interests have puff pieces written to act as sources backing up whatever claims they want to make. And again, my answer is, that's what capitalism does. If there's an ideological tool out there, it will be corrupted by financial interests of one sort or another. Don't pretend that your worldview doesn't tacitly allow for that to happen and for it to be okay. And don't act like you're suddenly up in arms about making people look bad using the internet when you're fighting tooth and nail to keep your website, The Kiwi Farms, online. If all you are is essentially just some website code-writing schlub who LARPs as an ANCAP free speech warrior, you just have to concede you got outplayed here, even by the standards of your own moral code. Like here, you complain that Wikipedia misrepresents Kiwi Farms, and that this extends to AI and Google. So you're complaining, essentially, about being slandered. But realistically, what about your worldview says that it's intrinsically bad to slander someone? Don't try and pull an appeal to morality out just because you lost. It's such bitch-made behaviour. Like, if you complain that Wikipedia characterises Kiwi Farms as a controversial web forum known for its users' online harassment and stalking campaigns against various individuals and communities, well, they are allowed to assert that. Maybe more people would be sympathetic to the idea of not describing your website in such a negative way if you hadn't just spent a decade actively trying to be so antagonistic towards so many people. Either do something about it that isn't just complaining, or accept that this is where your choices have gotten you. Similarly, you go on to complain that most people, or more people, should care about Liz Fong Jones's, quote, consent accident, and you decry that no one mainstream is covering that. Again, if she has the power to stop people reporting on that sort of thing, I don't know what to tell you. It just looks like her will to power is stronger. But why are you pretending that you care about the drama of the San Francisco tech exec trans swinger community or the morality of what goes on in it? I don't care about those things. I don't see why I should. And you shouldn't pretend you care about it either. But right now, you're getting your panties in a twist that someone somewhere is getting away with something, and that makes them bad and you righteous. That just sounds like cope to me. Frankly, you lost here. That's an honest assessment of the situation. You've been ideologically outcompeted. That's not unfair, that's just a consequence of you evidently not wanting it as much as the other team wanted it. Again, literally every single problem you have is backlash from your own actions. And you even end this article with a call to arms that all anti-censorship people need to band together, or else they'll absolutely all be crushed by the very same capitalist powers that be that in all other respects you think you love. But your problem is, namely, you can't even go a day without deliberately antagonizing the worldview that the majority of Westerners under 35 who lean increasingly progressive support. So you're just left preaching to a choir of reactionary shut-ins who have the same worldview as you, but who are just less technically capable, and they're not going to do shit about it either. It's the problem inherent to right-wing grassroots projects. If your worldview is intrinsically competitive and ultimately individualistic, how the fuck are you going to wrangle a team together long enough to build your own parallel anti-censorship internet infrastructure? Say what you want about liberals, at least they know how to fucking network. And if a bunch of moneyed up, networked industry libs do end up driving you and your mates offline for good just because they didn't like you, are the actual leftists and the commies and the anarchists like me supposed to shed any tears over that? Honestly, I for one am not going to.